Hello, my name is Scott Greene. I'm a senior digital forensics examiner with Evidence Solutions. Today we're going to talk about various types of digital evidence, usually surrounding car crashes and truck crashes in this case, but this evidence can be used in a lot of other cases as well. We're also going to talk about the other types of experts that are available at Evidence Solutions and some of the other areas of digital evidence that we examine. One of the big things that we examine are cell phones, as I mentioned. And cell phones sometimes are not available, and we have to rely on the call detail records, which come from the cell phone carrier. Call detail records are broken up into generally three different things. The cell phone calls themselves, text messages, and the transactions surrounding those, as well as data being transmitted to and from the cellular system from the cell phone. The first thing we're going to look at are calls. Calls are stored by the carriers in a variety of different ways, and they report them in a variety of different ways, and they keep their records for a wide variety of different time frames. So while AT&T may have records for years, some other records go away from other carriers in a relatively short time frame. What we see here actually is these are cell phone call records. We have a connect date and a connect time, which from AT&T is actually universal coordinated time, which is akin to Greenwich Mean Time without any daylight savings time adjustments. The next column we see is the seizure time. The seizure time is that time that we all know between when we hit send on our cell phone and actually it connects. And we can see that in this particular case on line 1, there's a 22-second seizure time. So it's trying to connect for 22 seconds. We're going to skip a couple of columns temporarily, and we're going to look at the elapsed time. In this particular case, this particular phone call never actually connected. Is an elapsed time of 0. And this would normally show the amount of time that the cell phones were connected or the cell phone was connected to a landline. The originating number, terminating number is the phone number that originated the phone call. If it's an inbound call, it's another person. If it's an outbound phone call, then it would be this particular cell phone's cellular number. The next thing we look at are text messages. Text messages also have a connect date and connect time. For AT&T, they're also stored in UTC. For other carriers, the cell phone calls can be stored in one time zone and the text messages can be stored in another. It's crazy, but that's how the carriers do it. Again, we have the originating number, which in this case ends in 5660. That's what this cell phone is. And it's making or sending text messages to a cell phone that ends in 3109. The IMEI and IMSI are actually serial numbers. The serial number for the device is actually the IMEI number, and the serial number for the SIM card that's installed in the device, or the subscriber identity, actually is the IMSI number. The last thing that we look at and it's not the last thing, there are times also when we look at cellular towers, but I'm not going to cover that today in this session. We do, however, look at the data and how much data is being transmitted to and from the cell phone. Again, we have a date time for the connection when this transaction actually started. And then for data, we actually have an elapsed time. So it's very similar to the amount of time that's in a cell phone call, but in this particular case, it's the amount of data that's actually sent up to the network or cellular system, and the amount of data that actually comes down. So we see that the elapsed time in this particular line on the top line is 13 minutes and 13 seconds, and a grand total of 6,677 bytes were transmitted from the phone to the cellular system, and 111,991 bytes were actually sent from the cellular system back to the cell phone or down to the cell phone. There are times when that's all we have to actually look at. love to, if I could have $100 for every cell phone that disappeared in litigation, but it happens. They're lost in a lake, or they're crushed in an accident, or the dog chewed it up, or whatever. Cell phones do disappear. And so sometimes we are just relying on the cell phone records to actually analyze what happened. And so the cell phone is always the best place to start to look for data, but we can still draw some conclusions, or some um, estimations of what was happening based upon the cell phone carrier records. And specifically in the case of data, we don't know exactly what the data being transmitted or received was. We don't know if it's Facebook. We don't know if they're browsing the internet or doing something else, sending a photo up. But sometimes we can draw a picture as to what that looks like, and it's curious. In this particular case, we see that there's data coming down to a cell phone that, interestingly enough, diminishes significantly just a few seconds before 911 is called. This is the same cell phone where data is being actually transmitted from the cell phone to the cellular system. And we see that the 911 call is very close to the same time that the data drops off significantly. Again, we don't know exactly what this data was, but we do know that data is being used, and that there's an adjustment that's made at or about the time that the 911 call is made. Another place that we go looking for evidence is Facebook. Facebook, everybody leaves their Facebook completely open. It's just real common. There are a few people who don't, and you have to be their friend before you can actually look at what they have. But most everybody just posts, and they leave it wide open. In this particular case, we see that this person actually was in North Dakota and actually submitted a photo on September 8th at 7:23 in the morning. This was actually complicated a little bit more because part of North Dakota is actually in the mountain time zone and part of it's in the central time zone. However, we were able to determine where this particular photo was taken and which tower was attached to when it was taken, so we know the right time zone. This gentleman actually took several photos, and then while he's making a trip, we actually use Google to determine how long it would take him to get from where he said he was to a location in Texas. And Google told us that it was a 23-hour and 16-minute drive. This particular person was actually driving a commercial motor vehicle and was supposed to make stops and rest stops and things like that. He managed to make this 23-hour and 16-minute drive in right about 26 hours. So other than stopping for fuel and maybe some food, he didn't make any stops in this particular trek. Another place that we look for data that's becoming popular are infotainment systems. Infotainment systems contain a tremendous amount of data. These are the devices that are built into your dash that allow you to navigate, change a radio station, look at status of your car and things like that. And these infotainment systems can have all kinds of information in them, starting with, of course, GPS data. They have GPS systems built into them. They're recording where the car is at all times, and that data can be harvested. In addition, automated functions such as automatic emergency braking and lane keeping can have data that's recorded in the infotainment system. Communications data such as SMS or text messages can be recorded. These in newer systems are read to the driver as they're driving, and drivers can actually respond. They can actually have the computer system translate their voice into text messages and then tell it to send a response. This also can happen with email. The systems vary in what they're capable of doing, and each one is different. Different manufacturers do different things, but by and large, most of them are coming up with new ways to use these infotainment systems to automate things and collect data in the car. In addition, there's call logs. As I indicated, the cellular phone is the best location to look for data, but as cellular phones disappear and data times out with the carrier, sometimes we want to look at the communications data that's stored in the infotainment system to make some determination. and call logs are stored in these infotainment systems, and it's one of the places that we look. In addition, we have information about the radio, what radio station was being listened to, what volume it was, and things like that. We know whether or not the interior lights were on, whether or not the exterior lights were on, the last time the right-hand door, passenger door was opened, the last time the windows were rolled down, and things like that. We also know information about parental and valet controls. Here's a graphic of just some of the things that are available. Not every system collects all of these items, but a lot of them are collecting more and more all the time. Another place we look for data in vehicle accidents are truck black boxes. These can be referred to as the engine control unit, the engine control module, or simply the black box. Newer black boxes can become increasingly sophisticated and have a lot more storage than they used to. We used to get just a few items or a few data points that would come out of a black box. Now we have some that actually have calendars built into them, so we can actually look back at particular dates and times and find out what was going on with the truck at any particular points in time. Newer modern devices have a tremendous amount of memory and store a lot more information. Car black boxes, on the other hand, are also increasing in what they store. These are referred to as airbag control modules, airbag control units, or event data recorders, or EDRs. That's our common name for them, also called a car black box. This is a car black box. This one happens to be mounted on the hump in the center of the vehicle. These can be found, however, underneath the dash, in the back seat, in the front seat, underneath seats, attached to the seats. There's all kinds of places that these modules can be mounted in a vehicle. In addition to knowing the speed and whether or not the brakes were on and the status of the accelerator, these items also know whether or not there was a deployment, for instance, on line 2 here, whether or not the seat belts were fastened at each seat in the car, whether the car was rolling over side to side, front to back, or things like that. There's a lot of information, and they're storing more as time goes on. Other places for evidence in truck and vehicle cases, of course, we talked about cell phones. We talked about the cell phone records. Electronic logging devices. These are the devices that have replaced paper logs in commercial motor vehicles. Dash cams have become a big source of information in vehicles. Infotainment systems, as we talked about, and then systems that are outside of these vehicles, things like dispatch systems and maintenance systems to record when maintenance was done on a vehicle, can be key in a particular case. Other common digital evidence, we also examine electronic medical records and computers, accounting systems, email systems, documents, both things like Word documents as well as PDFs for manipulation and alteration, as well as things like DocuSign documents. Where were these documents signed? How were they signed? Who signed them? Things like that, and much more. Other areas of expertise at Evidence Solutions, and we have more than this. If you're looking for a particular type of expert and you don't see it on our list or don't see it on our website, we may actually have a connection for that. That's how we ended up with a Greek fraternity expert. It was somebody that I knew, and somebody asked for one day. But we have trucking standard of care experts. We have police standard of care experts, sports and fitness expert, accident reconstruction, which is handled by a gentleman who used to be a rocket scientist with NASA, real estate investment trust, financial services, and of course, as I mentioned, Greek fraternity. Here's our information about how to contact me or Evidence Solutions. We look forward to working with you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call.